Okay, here we go. The sequel, part 2, Sex and Virginity. As before, I mentioned in part 1, the reason why you're watching this right now is because the agrarian values and the conservative institutions such as the family and the church have completely, utterly, and miserably failed in instituting premarital virginity, and for that matter teen virginity, in the modern world. I'm again restating that under this current pop culture, the knee-jerk whims of the materialism in today's world, Hollywood, so forth, has more power than any corrupt church ever did in the history of this planet. And I use my gauge and standard for sex. I don't want to hear how rapidly Christian rock is growing, as I said in part 1. I want to hear about how many teenagers are having sex. That's what matters, period. Okay, where do we start? Last time I had an outline. As you may remember, the cross on stuff. It's 11:07, okay. But now I just wanted to improv, because I realized I had so much stuff going on. Before I knew it, those 30 minutes just went by like that. Wow, where can I start? Alright, reasserting sexual problems, especially with teenagers and kids, doesn't start with the raw idea of sex. People ask, well, establish a guideline. You know, how far should a couple go when they're hugging, making out, or whatever? And actions. My assertion through all this is that it is your standard as to dating and the opposite sex, how you regard the opposite sex, which lays the groundwork, or whether or not you're going to have intercourse with your boyfriend or girlfriend 6 months, 8 months, a year into the relationship, 2 weeks into the relationship. So we need to attack our moral reference frame, our dating moral reference frame, before we can change our sexual habits. This is something that may come across as excessively conservative, but one problem that I have with a lot of watered down conservatism today is that it doesn't do what it says. Conservatism is the ideology of absolutism. There's a right and a wrong. It is impossible to accomplish a good thing from doing a bad thing or an incorrect premise. And likewise, it is impossible to take something that is good or a true premise, use it, and wind up with a bad action. So whenever we have a standard that we admit that we have a lot of mind games in dating, relationships become power struggles, there's a lack of respect for the opposite sex, we're shown not to show our feelings because it comes across as desperate or conceding some type of a power towards the person you're dating. And we think all this stuff will not lay the groundwork for the unhappy marriages and divorce. We're sorely mistaken. Another point of mine is that we are left with such a heavy amount of damage today that we cannot propose a solution that is going to work, that is going to last, that is going to be significant, and it not sound reactionary, which means very right-wing, extremely conservative to most people. It can't happen. If most people today knew what the problem was and how to fix it, then most people wouldn't have had sex as teenagers, wouldn't be divorced or come from divorced families. And we're not most people divorced, but if divorce is 1 and 2 and 50% increase and it's most married people, then these problems wouldn't exist. So the idea that the problem has gotten so bad that most people have had sex during their teenage years, regret it, and divorce is 50% right now, proves that most people will not be able to recognize the solution when it's given out. So this sounds like a pickle, but it's not. What happens is that you start off with a base of people that do see your way and do agree, and hopefully try to get people who feel the same way you do, visionaries, investors, or what have you. And then from that you build, it could be a place of business, like a building, something that gives out products and information, a physical place for people to go. Like we have the Mars and the bars and the malls. I won't go rewind the tape, it's good. Error, hello. Editing. The malls and the bars, which are institutions of the pop culture. Now, we have churches and church functions and youth mixers and stuff. Those are all divided among denomination. So you have a gigantic, cohesive, coagulated mass of teeny bopper pop culture, and they're one unit functioning like a gigantic unified body. But people who are more traditionally conservative, of family reunions and family picnics and church functions, they are scattered and broken, and we cannot win that way. So these new institutions either have to be secular or have to be some commonwealth organization of pretty much any conservative church denomination we have in Lafayette, Louisiana, the United States of America. That's got to happen. Because remember, in the modern world, in the pop culture, we are fighting these liberal entities on their turf. These aren't the agrarian days of the 1800s when you don't have fads and fashions, materialism, excessive leisure time, movies, books, CDs, posters, an entire entertainment industry which is totally inverted from agrarian-based morality. So keep that in mind. We're fighting them on their turf. Okay, what is this radical solution of mine that I'm convinced will work, but I'm also convinced most people won't see as necessary? It's going to be too excessive. Call it what you want, media houses, morality centers, or whatever. But at some point we're going to have a physical location, a building, a place to go for people to associate with each other, fixed and hell-bent on getting to know the opposite sex. Not through the traditional ways at the bars at 2 o'clock in the morning and stuff, and nickel night and ladies free night and wet t-shirt night and stuff, but out of talking. It's going to have to be physically set. I'll call it a nerd rally, who cares, doesn't matter. And people will have to be coming and boycotting the bars and boycotting the strip clubs, coming to that place and advertising on TV, newspapers, AOC, right, whatever. Can we get away with that on AOC? We can't. No. Never mind. Okay. Hello, legality. Okay. So anyway, but on some other station, okay, get these people to get like a normal bit, run it like a business. Run it like a business, just like you run a dating service. But what happens is that it's a physical place to go to rather than sentiment that you carry around by yourself in conversations. It would be our first step in a conservative sexual revolution to start drawing the line on a map, like we're staking our territory right here. We're not going to be content that the liberal institutions have their place, their full existence. I'm watching, the preview channel and I see the advertisements for Desperados. I know the place was a strip club till a while back. And, Love Works. They have their advertisements and their, lover commercials and camel toe blue jeans. I heard on the radio. If you don't know what a camel toe is, I ain't going to say it on AOC. But all these entities, they have their guns, they have their weapons, they have their buildings. You can find them on the map. They have their territory. So it's time for us to have our territory more organized. Now, one thing that bothers me about, of the many things that bother me, I was talking to a Generation Xer, a friend of mine. He even conceded to me that bars aren't the ideal place to meet women, and it's not the ideal denominator in which to meet women. And he said, but Kirk, where else are you going to go? So we have a big contradiction here. You're admitting it's wrong, but you're making absolutely no step to stop it or to fight it. Now you might say, how can this be done? But a psycho like me has the plan, because people like me look at society from a distance, and we think about this every single second of our lives. Okay, period. I have the plan. I got blueprints and notes. Look at my room. See, one friend of mine clowned me one time, like whenever they go in the movie Seven with that psycho killer, and they're breaking into his house. They find out that Morgan Freeman's reading all the notes. He goes, "Look, Kirk, look your room. Look all your little political multimedia empires and your plans and your blueprints." I thought that was pretty funny. Anyway, so what happens here is that once we do this, it will be a foot in the door, a first step towards separating ourselves from a lot of businesses and entities that are tied to the pop culture. A next step of this would have to be an army of accountants and people who trace businesses and which money from businesses goes where. So we can start boycotting these locally in certain towns and states or what have you. There's a lot of flack going on in politics about the American Family Association, the Southern Baptists, and the Concerned Women for America joining together in the boycotts of Disney. And there's the Conservative Christian Long Distance Company boycotting the 3 big long distance companies and so forth. Now all of these are a step in the right direction, but for them to take effect, they're going to have to be excessive, and they're going to have to be on a widespread, massive scale. And people need to see the magnitude of how far something can be taken like this. Now, a lot of people are going to have problems with this, but oh, this is extremism and stuff. What happens is that it is unprecedented that we have had a country in this planet with the excessive degree of materialism and in a post-industrial society that we do today. People agree that immorality, blatant sexuality is everywhere. The movies, the billboards, TV, the internet. So the damage is so entrenched and so intertwined, it is impossible for us not to have this extracting, meticulous, excessive solution to counter that complex mess. You cannot take a simple theme or simple answer and address a complex problem and win. It does not work. So thinking along these lines might be scary to a lot of people, or think it's a waste of time, but this is coming from people who have no solutions of their own. How are you going to counter these gigantic entities? You can't. What they do is that they usually bathe and numb themselves in romanticism about, you just got to give your best, or all you can do is watch out for your kids and hope they don't take these ways. Well, it's about time that social conservatism stops being some footnote in the history books when we read about the 1920s. It's about time that social conservatism becomes the true standard for the United States of America, as opposedly what it is now, some cloak or some illusion. We have a couple of Republicans in Congress now, and I'm so sick and tired about how here in Generation X is so conservative. Oh, we're turning back the hippies. We saw the mistakes of our parents, but yet teen sex of our generation is reportedly at 60%. And then we're told so much that, oh, most people are conservative, but yet we put Bill Clinton in the White House. It just doesn't fly, So, another thing about distancing yourself. I've also asserted that whenever you think along lines and you find it to be malcontent with the way that things go today, politics and power struggles between the sexes, people have completely given up on dating, they're fed up with the opposite sex, people become a little bitter and fed up between the genders. Women accuse men of being sex crazy or dominant, unfaithful, insensitive. Men accuse women of being indecisive, not being clear what they want, completely unpredictable, irrational, expecting you to read their minds and so forth, and it just gets worse and worse. So my point is that this mess that we're in right now is not some gigantic unicolor, that's a such word, homogeneous glob. It is a very clear, very distinct but complex phenomena, entity, whatever you want to call it. This is something I got told in calculus a while back by my professor. No, in fact it was this semester, no, it wasn't a while back. He said that with a few simple rules you can tear apart very complicated things. When you start distancing yourself because you're drawing a line in life and being fed up with so much of what's going on today, you will see more and more steps of what needs to be done. Me, as an alienated teenager from 8 years ago, and I was suicidal my junior year in high school, I saw so much of this world as a gigantic hopeless mess. And throughout these next couple of years of my life, my anger has kept me to distance myself from the mainstream as possibly as I could. So therefore I see society's mistakes from a distance, as all nerds do. And once again, I'm proud to say I'm part of the nerd subculture. What happens is that when you start seeing common occurrences, you start seeing recurring themes, and you start to build up this laundry list of the problems, what's causing what. And in that, solutions don't seem so far-fetched. It doesn't seem so hopeless about, oh, I don't know where to start, or how's that going to take effect, or when you see someone's first steps, it doesn't seem like it's doing anything or accomplishing anything, you know. So that's the trap. It's not so much something that's going to make sense at first snap, but when you start isolating a couple of themes, then you're going to see how more and more can be plausible. Okay, there's an attachment, alright. Now, one thing is that this can be made a legal issue very easily. Now, a lot of people might say, well, hold up, it's psycho-conservatism, it's government in the bedroom. No. As I've asserted, liberals are the ones that push government in the bedroom because they're the ones that target very young kids with their radical biology-based sexual education programs. And so, therefore, kids are a lot more easy to influence than adults. You can pass whatever legislation you want. You're not going to change adults' sexual habits, do that, but you can screw up kids. So liberals are the ones that use government force and coercion to push their sexual agenda on people, kids who are more influenceable, impressionable than adults. So they're the true sexual deviants and the pushers of government in the bedroom. What I am advocating is that issues cannot continue to be important and to be volatile, and it eventually not manifests itself in the courtroom or in our political system. It happens. The most that I'll be an advocate of is having businesses be obligated to, if they want your money or you to deal with them, to hand over a list of people they do business with. So if they're doing business with some entity that might be pro-homosexuality or pro-abortion or something, then you can boycott them. Now, it's more like giving people the sight to see what they're supporting. You'll say, well, you have a right to demand to know that a business isn't supporting some of these other entities, or you won't support them. So it's more like that you have it's not imposing morality on them, but it's stopping them from dragging you into supporting their moral choices. So the most that we're going to have to do is something that's indirect. It won't be something like, passing a constitutional amendment making it illegal to have sex before you get married. That's ridiculous. But these issues do manifest themselves in the courtroom. Same thing about boycotting porno strip clubs. That kind of stuff is, going to have to happen more. It's just that you might say, well, big deal, we'll be doing that forever. But you see, it's going to have to be done on a very micro level, a very meticulous level for it to carry that punch. Now, about chastity, abstinence, and all that kind of stuff. Here's a quote from, I want to say, Pope Paul VI. He was Pope from 1963, and these years are only his birthday, 1897 to 1978. This impressed me about his sixth encyclical on priestly celibacy, June 23rd, 1967. Chastity is not acquired all at once, but results from a laborious conquest and daily affirmation. This blew my mind. I thought it was incredible. Now, this is applying. This is great thoughts, quotes and stuff. Cool little book. Anyway, this is applying to priests and stuff, but I think this can apply to everyone. And going back to this point, these moral choices and revolutions, it can happen, and I think it has to happen in our generation, or there's just no hope for America. But what happens is that it isn't something that looks great all at once, and it isn't something that can be done all at once. But at some point you have to say, you don't worry about what the seeming and apparent results are. You worry about which sentiment this is rooted in. And whenever you think, okay, porno and stripping is wrong, so don't go there. Or I blatantly acknowledge that bars are a disgusting denominator in which to use to meet the opposite sex, so don't go there. Don't compromise. Don't think that you can mix bad in with good and it all comes out good. And when you start drawing lines, having some solid standpoints, then you have a firm base to draw a next level of solid standpoints and lines. This is a point I made to a friend of mine, and another a Republican friend of mine, in fact, in the campus, quoted it back to me one night because he said it really stuck in his mind because it was consistent with a lot of military training he had. Conservatives, because they push absolute morality, are usually written off as hypocrites, saying, well, they think they're always right. It's not true. There's a big difference between asserting that there is an absolute truth and the fact that you know every single time what is the absolute truth. It's two radically different things. I told my friend, if you draw lines in life, you'll always have a chance of being wrong. But if you never draw lines in life, then you're always wrong. And so that's exactly how bad and how desperate and how pathetic the situation has gotten. With time a radio broadcast on Rush Limbaugh heard illegitimacy is now at 1/3. I mean, we cannot have this exploding teen sex and unhappy marriages and divorce. And then that's not even reported that the marriages that don't end in divorce are happy. So statistically, you can say that happy marriages are in the minority. That is anemic, that is disgusting, and a nation cannot survive as long as we're going with that. It's going to get nasty, it's going to be ugly, and we're going to need some people with some genuine guts who aren't scared of being ridiculed and who aren't scared to be labeled as kooks, who aren't scared of doing something that they have to question is kooky themselves to get stuff like this done. 28, alright? That's 21 minutes. I have 9 minutes left. As I said, time flies. This is a quote which is awesome. I got from an email from an Alan Keyes supporter. This is a quote from General Douglas MacArthur. That's one of the best quotes I think I could ever manage to read or hear in my life. History fails to record a single precedent in which nations subject to moral decay have not passed into political and economic decline. There has either been a spiritual awakening to overcome the moral lapse or a progressive deterioration to ultimate national disaster. Now, here's some scraps on my webpage on the internet I have called Virgin Resistance. So when you're on the web, do a web search for Kirk Fontenot of Virgin Resistance. You're going to find it. Mistakes in defending virginity. Okay, I say referring to loss of virginity is a problem rather than a symptom. I've covered that. It's our frame of reference towards dating the opposite sex, which lays the groundwork for the sex to take place later. So that's done. Covered that. We equate sex with something tangible and physical rather than something that's intangible. The biology of the intercourse is tangible and visible, especially in today's society and media. But sex itself is not. And whenever we refer to it in ways of postponing a normal function of the human body or going against biology, we're trying to say that to assert that there can be moral consequences for sex is secondary, because the biology is reality and it takes precedence over what we want to superficially add to it. That's not the case, because biology tells us that at some point it's designed that some male and female can have sex, which is fine. So pushing premarital virginity is not going against biology. Biology doesn't make any sense for us to have arbitrary sexuality. And think about it. What could be more damaging to a child who doesn't have their parents? Now, one of the biggest things we have about the lack of male or female influence from one child in a divorced household and that kind of stuff. Human nature is not so rawly and poorly designed that there can be a need for a child to have a male and female parent, and at the same time it's natural that the parents aren't together through the child's adolescence. It doesn't work that way. It's supposed to be that who you get pregnant is supposed to be who you continue to live with and raise a child with. And we're under premises like this, it seems to be otherwise. Okay, people like me who blame the media and the modern world, make sure that you don't do it directly. And I'll cover that in my first part of the tape, that you say it's a tool, it's a factor, it's part of the mess, but it's not something that makes sex happen. Okay. Okay, this is to be repetitious. Pretty much Okay, these are elements of advantages of the props. That's my abbreviation for premarital sexers. 1131. Okay. Sex has a natural, aggressive, and emotionally intimidating quality to it. It carries a lot of emotion. It's something that you can intimidate someone with. It's something that you can embarrass someone with. Whenever you're talking about a golf swing and you're telling them, look, you got your elbow too high, you're doing it all wrong, they can't get personally offended by that. But you start bringing up abortion and divorce and condoms and premarital sex, and you're going to offend people, you know. So they're going to get raw about it, and they're going to get offended, and it's something that needs to be addressed, but it carries this big impact to it. So the people who might want to make the change tend to either shy away from it or get scared of doing it or whatever, which is ridiculous. Another thing I've seen, the I'm on your side technique that a lot of pro-condoms and pro-safe sexers use and so forth. They go ahead and say they're not for aggressively for teen sex, absolutely. You know, if they would even agree, well, yes, if we lived in a perfect world where no one died unless of old age and there was no crime and everyone stayed a virgin until they get married. So they go ahead and say that, but they just continue with their agenda. So them saying that, and just because they're not campaigning for mandated premarital sex or teen sex for everyone, doesn't make them any less of an enemy. It means that they're not personally trying to do it, but their agenda is getting it done, so that's still irrelevant. Now, okay, well, yeah, I say this, moral consequences, we write it off as something not a big deal, something that can hurt and scar someone, that leaves them with a lot of tension, a lot of questions. It's so mainstream now, it's regarded as not a big deal. Okay, I have a couple of tips for defending it. 33. Wow. Alright, I got about 3 minutes left. Oh man, that's it. That's 27 minutes. Alright, one thing about the condom, people put them in a now watch position. Say that now that you've established you're giving them condoms, how are you going to get rid of it now? Permanently integrating condoms into schools and never getting them out. So it's a step in the wrong direction. Oh well, my time's up. Wait for part 3. See ya.